Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. So find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, let's relax with this handy guide to realizing our theatrical dreams. How to Produce Amateur Plays, a Practical Manual by Barrett H. Clark. Published in 1923 in a new and revised edition by Little, Brown and Company, Boston. Let's begin. Preface to the revised edition. This book aims to supply the demand for a simple guide to the production of plays by amateurs. During the past decade, a number of books dealing with the subject have been published, but these are concerned either with theoretical and educational, or else with limited and, from a practical viewpoint, unessential aspects of the question. In the present manual, the author has attempted an altogether practical work, which may be used by those who have little or no knowledge of producing plays. The book is not altogether limited in its appeal merely to producers. Actors themselves, and others having to do with amateur producing, will find it helpful. The author has added a number of suggestions on a matter which is rapidly becoming of prime importance: the construction of stages and setting, and the manipulation of lighting. The chief purpose of this volume is to lay down the elements and outline the technique of amateur producing. A careful study of it will enable the amateur stage manager to do much for himself, which has heretofore been either impossible or attended with dire difficulty. The plan of the book is simple. Each question and problem is treated in its natural order, from the moment an organization decides to give a play until the curtain drops on the last performance of it. This new edition of How to Produce Amateur Plays has been revised throughout, and the list of plays in Chapter 10 completely rewritten and brought up to date. The author acknowledges his indebtedness for suggestions and help, as well as for permission to reproduce diagrams, photographs, and passages from plays to Mr. T. R. Edwards, Mr. Hiram Kelly Mutterwell, Mr. L. R. Lewis, Mr. Clayton Hamilton, Miss Grace Griswold, Miss Edith Wynne Matheson, Mr. Morris Brown, Miss Ida Treat, Mr. Sam Hume, John Lane Company, Samuel French, Brentanos, and Henry Holt and Company. Barrett H. Clark, March 1922. How to Produce Amateur Plays, Chapter 1. Choosing the Play. The first important question arising after the decision to give a play is, what play? Only too often is this question answered in a haphazard way. Of recent years, a large number of guides to selecting plays have made their appearance, most of which are incomplete and otherwise unsatisfactory. The large lists issued by play publishers are bewildering. Toward the end of the present volume is a selective list of plays, all of which are in one way or another worthwhile, but as conditions differ so widely, it is practically impossible to do otherwise than merely indicate in a general way what sort of play is suggested. Each play considered by any organization should be read by the director, or even the whole club or cast, after the requisite conditions have been considered. These conditions usually are: 1. Size of the cast. This is obviously a simple matter. A cast of 10 cannot play Shakespeare. 2. Ability of the cast. This is a little more difficult. While it is a laudable ambition to produce Ibsen, let us say, no high school students are sufficiently mature or skilled to produce A Doll's House. As a rule, the well-known classics, Shakespeare, Molière, Goldoni, Sheridan, Goldsmith, suffer much less from inadequate acting and production than do modern dramatists. The opinion of an expert, or at least of someone who has had experience in coaching amateur plays, should be sought and acted upon. If, for example, As You Like It is under consideration, it must be borne in mind that the role of Rosalind requires delicate and subtle acting, and if no suitable woman can be found for that part, a simpler play, like the Comedy of Errors, had much better be substituted. Modern plays are on the whole more difficult. The portrayal of a modern character calls for greater variety, maturity, and skill than the average amateur possesses. The characters in Molière's The Merchant Gentleman, Shakespeare's The Comedy of Errors, Sheridan's The Rivals, are more or less well-known types, and acting of a conventional and imitative kind is better suited to them. On the other hand, only the best trained amateurs are able to impart the needful appearance of life and actuality to a play like Henry Arthur Jones's The Liars. Still, there are many modern plays, among them Shaw's You Never Can Tell and Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, in which no great subtlety of characterization is called for. These can be produced as easily by amateurs as can Shakespeare and Sheridan. 3. The kind of play to be presented usually raises many questions which are entirely without the scope of purely dramatic considerations. In this country especially, there is a studied avoidance among schools, and often among colleges and universities, of so-called unpleasant plays. Without entering into the reasons for this aversion, it is rather fortunate, because as a general rule, thesis, sex, and problem plays are full of pitfalls for amateur actors and producers. While it is a splendid thing to believe no play too good for amateurs, some moderation is necessary where a play under consideration is obviously beyond the ability of a cast. Hamlet ought never to be attempted by amateurs, nor such subtle and otherwise difficult plays as Man and Superman. Plays of the highest merit can be found which are not so taxing as these. There is no reason why Sophocles' Electra, Euripides' Alcestis, or the comedies of Lope de Vega, Goldoni, Molière, Kotzebue, Lessing, not to mention the better-known English classics, should not be performed by amateurs. It goes without saying that the facile, trashy, popular comedies of the past 2 or 3 generations are to be avoided by amateurs who take their work seriously. This does not mean that all farces and comedies should be left out of the repertory. The Magistrate and The Importance of Being Earnest are among the finest farces in the language. The point to be impressed is that it is better to attempt a play, which may be more difficult to perform than Charlie's Aunt, than to give a good performance of that oft-acted and decidedly hackneyed piece. It is much more meritorious to produce a good play poorly, if need be, than a poor play well. If, after having consulted the list in this volume and similar other lists, the club is still unable to decide on a suitable modern play, the best course is to return to the classics. It is likely that the plays that have pleased audiences for centuries will please us. Aristophanes, The Clouds, and Lysistrata, with a few necessary cuts, Plautus's The Twins, and Terence's Phormio, Goldoni's The Fan, Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors, and half a dozen other comedies, Molière's Merchant Gentleman, and Doctor in Spite of Himself, Sheridan's The Rivals, and Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer, Lessing's Minna von Barnhelm. Almost any one of these is safe. A classic can never be seen too often, and since true amateurs are those who play for the joy of playing, they will receive ample recompense for their efforts, in the thought that they have at least added their mite to the sum total of true enjoyment in the theater. Another argument in favor of the performance of the classics is that they are rarely produced by professionals. If an amateur club revives a classic, especially one which is not often seen nowadays, it may be well proud of its efforts. If, however, the club insists on giving a modern play, it will have little difficulty in finding suitable material. It is well not to challenge comparison with professional productions by choosing plays which have had professional runs of late. Try rather to select 1. Good modern plays, which by reason of their subject matter, form, etc., cannot under present conditions be commercially successful, like Granville Barker's The Marrying of Anne Leet. 2. Translations of contemporary foreign plays, which are not well known either to American readers or producers. And finally, 3. Original plays. Here it is difficult to advise. It cannot be hoped that an amateur club will discover many masterpieces among original plays submitted to it, but if any of the works considered has even a touch of originality, some good characterization, any marked technical skill, in a word, if there is something interesting or promising, then it is worth producing. Doubtless many beginners are discouraged from writing plays for lack of experience gained by seeing their work staged. For such, the amateur club is the only resource. Besides these particular considerations, there remain the minor but necessary points relating to rights and royalties. A full statement of the legal aspect of the case is to be found in the first appendix in this book. Chapter 2. Organization. A great many more factors go into the making of a successful dramatic production than may at first be apparent. To organize a staff whose duty it is to furnish and equip a theater, hall, or schoolroom, to arrange and efficiently run rehearsals, to supply props, costumes, and furniture, to manage the stage during the performance. All this is next in importance to the acting itself. Of late years especially, it has been made clear that the art of the theater, although it is a collaboration of the brains and hands of many persons, must be under the supervision of one dominating and far-seeing chief. That is to say, one person and one alone must be responsible for the entire production. Except in rare instances, this head cannot know of and attend to each detail himself, but it is his business to see that the whole organization is formed and managed according to his wishes. The function of this ideal manager has been compared with that of the orchestral conductor. It is he who leads, and he should be the first to detect the slightest discord. While the foregoing remarks are more strictly applicable to acting and staging, it will readily be seen that if the same leader is not in touch with the more practical side of the production, there is likely to arise that working at cross purposes which has ruined many an amateur as well as professional production. While a great deal of the actual work must be done by subordinates, it should be clearly understood that the director has the final word of authority. Much in the matter of organization depends upon the number and ability and experience of those persons who are available, but the suggestions about to be made as to the organization of a staff are based upon the assumption that the director is a capable person and his assistants at least willing to learn from him. As a rule, he will have plenty of material to work with. The director, the head under whose guidance the entire work of rehearsing and organization should lie, is called the director. However, since this position is often held by a hired coach or by someone else who cannot be expected to attend to much outside the actual rehearsing, there must be elected or appointed an officer who is directly responsible. This officer is the stage manager. As the director cannot always be present at every rehearsal, and as oftentimes two parts of the play are rehearsed simultaneously, it is evident that another director must be ready to act in place of the head. It is chiefly his duty to hold the prompt book and keep a careful record of all stage business, cuts, etc. At every rehearsal, he must be ready to prompt either lines or business, action, gestures, crosses, entrances, exits, and the like, and call the attention of the director to omissions or mistakes of every sort. In the event of the director's absence, he becomes the pro tem director himself. It is advisable, though not always possible, to delegate the duties of property man, light man, curtain man, costume man, or wardrobe mistress to different persons. But even when this is done, it is better for the stage manager to keep a record of all property plots, light plots, furniture plots, etc. It is also the stage manager's business to arrange the time and place of rehearsals and hold each actor responsible for attendance. On the occasion of the dress rehearsal and of the actual production, it is the stage manager and not the director who supervises everything. His position is that of commander-in-chief. He either holds the book or is at least close by the person who actually follows the lines, sees that each actor is ready for his entrance, that the curtain rises and falls when it should, that his assistants are each in their respective places, and that the entire performance goes as it is intended to go. The business manager. This person attends to such matters as renting the theater, or arranging some place for the performance, printing and distributing tickets. In short, everything connected with the receipt and expenditure of money. It is not, of course, imperative that he should have much to do with the director, the only point to be borne in mind being that everyone connected with the production of a play should be in touch with those in authority. The business manager ought to have at least a preliminary conference with the director, and report to him every week until a few days before the performance, when he should be within instant call in case of emergency. The property, light, furniture, and costume people must naturally keep in close touch with him, although no purchases should be made without the permission of the director, who in this case must be at one with the club or organization. The property man. The duties attaching to this position are definitely and necessarily limited, but of great importance. Working under the stage manager, he supplies all the objects, such as revolvers, swords, letters, etc. In a word, everything actually used by the actors, and not falling under the categories of scenery, costumes, and furniture. It will be found necessary in some cases to add to the staff one person whose business it is to attend to the matter of furnishings, rugs, hangings, pictures, furniture, and so forth. But in case there is no such person, the property man attends to these details himself. It cannot be too strongly urged that from the very first as many props, as much furniture, or as many set pieces as possible, depending on whether the set is an indoor or outdoor one, should be used by the actors. In this way they will be better able to associate their thoughts, words, and gestures with the material objects with which they will be surrounded on the fatal night. If this is impracticable, that is, if most of these objects cannot be secured from the first, then at least suitable substitutes should be used. The presence of such fundamentally important articles as the wall in Rostand's The Romancers and the dentist chair in Shaw's You Never Can Tell, when used from the first rehearsals, always minimizes the danger of confusion of lines or business at the last moment. The property man must keep a list of everything required. This should be a duplicate of that in the possession of the stage manager. The light man, sometimes even nowadays called the gas man. He is not indispensable, because almost always the regular electrician attends to the switchboard. However, someone should be with the electrician at the dress rehearsal and on the evening of the performance to give him the necessary light cues. Usually, however, the stage manager who holds the prompt book, where all the light cues are indicated, can fulfill this function. The costume man, or wardrobe mistress, as the case may be. Again, the duties are simple. If the play is a classic, Shakespeare for instance, the costumes in 99 cases out of 100 had better be rented from a regular costumer. The costume man, then, together with the business manager, attends to the details of renting and sees that all costumes are ready for the dress rehearsal. If the costumes are made to order, the matter is supervised by the costume man. But as with everything else connected with the best amateur efforts, there should be some expert advisor, not so much one versed in history and archaeology as an artist with an eye for color and style. The director in any event must be consulted, so that lights, scenery, and costumes may harmonize. Details as to costumes are to be found in many books, and need not here be discussed. In spite of a good deal that has been written to the contrary, historical accuracy is not of vast importance. So long as there are no glaring anachronisms, Shakespeare may be presented with actors wearing pre- or post-Elizabethan costumes, provided they are beautiful and harmonize. Among the 1,001 minor details of producing, there are some which in large productions might be assigned to specially appointed individuals, but most of the duties to be briefly enumerated below may easily be given over to the stage manager, property man, or costume man, or even to the light man. Handling and setting of scenery and furniture. This is usually taken care of by the property man and his assistants, under the direction of the stage manager. As in every other branch of the work, all details must be planned beforehand and recorded. Music. The music cue should be marked in the stage manager's prompt book. Incidental music, whether it be on, behind, or off stage, ought to be rehearsed at least 2 or 3 times. On the occasion of the performance, the stage manager gives directions from his prompt book for all music cues. Crowds or large groups. The management and rehearsing of crowds or large groups is considered under rehearsing, page 58. Here it will suffice to state that it is well to have an assistant whose duty it is to see that the supernumeraries, are conducted on and off the stage at the right time. Among the further details which must be looked after are the duties which are sometimes left to the stage manager. The ringing of bells, calling of actors at the regular performance, etc. A call boy might be delegated to do this. Understudies. Trouble is always likely to arise, especially among amateurs, because there is no effective method of holding the actors to strict account. Often, one or more of the cast finds, or thinks he finds, good reason for leaving it, and a new actor must sometimes be found and trained to fill the vacancy on perilously short notice. Sickness or indisposition invariably give rise to the same problem. If possible, an entire second cast should be trained, so that any member of it could at a moment's notice be called upon to play in the first cast. While this second company should be letter perfect and know the business in every detail, it is not necessary that their acting be so finished as that of the others. Understudy rehearsals are under the direction of the stage manager, although the director should witness at least 2 or 3. Since the performance depends almost wholly on the knowledge, sympathy, and taste of the director, the greatest care should be taken in choosing him. Needless to say, the ideal director does not exist. Still, his attributes should be constantly borne in mind. If he lacks the artist's sense of color, rhythm, and proportion, then an art advisor must be called in to suggest color schemes as regards costumes, scenery, furniture, and lighting. Nowadays, great attention is being paid to these matters, and the subtle effect of background and detail is much greater than is commonly supposed. The play is of first importance. That must never be forgotten. But these other matters are too often neglected. Similarly with costumes, music, scenery, it is never amiss to consult authorities. But once more be it repeated, the whole production should bear the imprint of the director's personality, because only in this way can we hope for that essential unity of effect which is a basic principle of all art. Cooperation with, but in the last analysis subserviency to the director, is the keynote of success. Chapter 3: Choosing the Cast. Obviously, the choice of the cast should depend upon the ability of the actors, although in the case of an organization like a school or college dramatic club, this system is not always practicable or even advisable. Every member of such a club should be trained to work for a common end, and a system by which amateurs are made to understand the necessity of assuming first small and unimportant roles and working up gradually to the greater and more important ones, makes for harmony and completeness of effect in performances. It should be one of the chief ends of amateur producing to get away from the curse of the professional stage, the star system. It has been stated here that the greatest emphasis must be laid on the play itself, and no actor, professional or amateur, should ever labor under the delusion that he is of greater or even as great importance as the play in which he strives to act his part. The average actor is inclined to judge a play's merit according to the sort of part it furnishes him. The amateur spirit has done much to do away with this attitude, and it is to be hoped that no coach will ever do otherwise than discourage it. Competition as a means of selecting a cast is in most cases the best method. The play once selected, the people from among whom the cast is to be formed are assembled. It is a good plan to have everyone read the play first, and make a study of at least one scene of it. Then, either alone or in company with 1, 2, or 3 others, he reads or recites from memory the scene in question, either before the entire club or before a committee of judges. Each actor is judged on appearance, ease, voice, and insight into the character he is portraying. The judges, seconded possibly by the members of the club, whose vote should, by the way, be of only secondary importance, then select those whom they consider best fitted for the parts. In every case, the director should give final sanction to the selection. In cases where members must at first assume only minor parts because of club rules, there may arise some difficulty. For example, a beginner may be better fitted to assume an important role than older club members. Such cases must, of course, be dealt with individually. In organizations which are not run on so democratic a basis, the director selects the cast himself. On the whole, this is much the best system, as the director is left a free field in which to work out his own problems in his own way. If it is at all possible, an amateur club ought to put everything, including the responsibility, into the hands of a competent director. In this respect, the despotism of the professional stage is most beneficial. Whether the coach be an outsider hired for the occasion or a regular member of the club, in 9 cases out of 10, he will establish and maintain harmony, allow no real talent to languish, and be at least in a position to produce definite artistic results. Amateur management has spoiled much good material. A director with full authority can work more easily and efficiently if left to his own devices than if trammeled with rules and regulations. The theater behind the scenes is a despotic institution. It must be, but the greatest care must be taken in choosing the right despot. Should the coach be a professional manager or actor, or should he be an amateur? The question is a difficult one. There are, it goes without saying, many excellent directors who are or have been professionals. On the other hand, it cannot be denied that some of the best amateur work in this country has been done by directors whose experience on the professional stage has, to say the least, been limited. Some such training is beneficial, but to put a professional of many years' experience in charge of amateurs is likely to make of the amateurs a company of puppets imitating only some of the externals of professionaldom. The best director, therefore, seems to be a person who has some professional experience, but who has likewise dealt with amateurs. One who enters into the amateur spirit and understands its difference from the professional world, and does not try to train his company to imitate stock actors or stars. Understudies may be chosen in the same manner as the first cast. After the choosing of the casts, the next step is rehearsing. To this complicated process, the next 3 chapters are devoted. Chapter 4. Rehearsing, Part 1. The first rehearsal should be called as soon as possible after the cast has been selected and a place chosen in which to work. If the play is to be performed in a regular theater, it is wise to block out the general action and have at least the first 2 or 3 rehearsals on the stage. It would be still better if all the rehearsals could be conducted there, but as this is seldom possible, the stage manager should take its dimensions and secure some room as near the size of the stage as he can find. A room too large or too small, or not the requisite shape, is more than likely to confuse the actors. As many of the essential props and articles of furniture as possible should be used from the very first, in order to accustom the actors to work under approximately the same conditions as on the occasion of the performance. If the play can be secured in printed form, each actor will have his copy, and a general reading to the cast by the director or stage manager be rendered unnecessary. However, a few remarks by him as to the nature and spirit of the play will not be amiss. It is not uncommon to hear of professionals who have never read or seen the entire play, even after acting in it for many months. Unless each actor knows and feels what the play is about and enters into its spirit, there can be little chance for unity and harmony. Cutting or other alteration is often necessary. The director should read his alterations and allow each actor to make his text conform with the prompt copy. When the play is not obtainable in book form, each role is then copied from the manuscript, together with the cues and all the stage business. In this case, a general reading to the cast is imperative. The preliminaries disposed of, the play is read, each actor taking his part. This is merely to familiarize the actors with the play and show them briefly their relation to each other and the work as a whole. At this first rehearsal, there should be no attempt at acting. That is reserved for the next meeting. At the second rehearsal, which should take place the day after the first, the director blocks out the action. Note: the system here followed must of necessity be arbitrary, but the principle is easy to grasp. A great deal depends on the ability of the actors and the time they can afford. If the play be a full-length one, approximately 2 hours, then one act of this general blocking out will be found to occupy all the time. If the play is in a single act, and provided it be not too long, then the entire play may be blocked out. What is blocking out? Let us take an easy example and block out the first few minutes of Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. Here follows the text of the first 2.5 pages. Scene: morning room in Algernon's flat in Half Moon Street. The room is luxuriously and artistically furnished. The sound of a piano is heard in the adjoining room. Lane is arranging afternoon tea on the table, and after the music has ceased, Algernon enters. Algernon: did you hear what I was playing, Lane? Lane: I didn't think it polite to listen, sir. Algernon: I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life. Lane: yes, sir. Algernon: and speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell? Lane: yes, sir. He hands them on a salver. Algernon inspects them, takes 2, and sits down on the sofa. Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed. Lane: yes, sir, 8 bottles and a pint. Algernon: why is it that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information. Lane: I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand. Algernon: good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that? Lane: I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person. Algernon, languidly: I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane. Lane: no, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself. Algernon: very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane, thank you. Lane: thank you, sir. Lane goes out. Algernon: Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility. Enter Lane. Lane, Mr. Ernest Worthing. Enter Jack. Lane goes out. Algernon. How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town? Jack. Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring me anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy. Algernon, stiffly. I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday? Jack, sitting down on the sofa. In the country. Algernon, what on earth do you do there? Jack, pulling off his gloves. When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring. Algernon, and who are the people you amuse? Jack, airily. Oh, neighbors, neighbors. Algernon, got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire? Jack, perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them. Algernon, how immensely you must amuse them. Goes over and takes sandwich. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not? Jack, Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello, why all these cups? Why such extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea? The first point to be noticed is that the stage directions are not sufficient. To begin with, the only information we have as to the morning room is that it is in Algernon Moncrief's flat in Half Moon Street, and that it is luxuriously and artistically furnished. The next directions, Lane is arranging tea on a table, prove that there is a tea table with tea things on it. We are therefore dependent on the ensuing dialogue and the implied or briefly described action to furnish clues as to the entrances, furniture, and props which will be required in the course of the act. It is, of course, the director's and the stage manager's business to go through the play beforehand and have all these points well in mind. Let us now see how this is done, and proceed to block out the first part of the play. The room evidently at least has 2 doors, one leading into the hallway, upstage center, the other halfway downstage right, let us say for the present, as in this diagram. Note: right and left in stage directions mean from the actor's point of view. Upstage and downstage mean respectively away from and toward the footlights. Before Algernon's entrance, Lane the butler is preparing tea. Where is the table? Some subsequent business may necessitate its being in a position different from the one first chosen, but let us assume that it is upstage to the right as shown. There it is not likely to be in the way of the actors. Furthermore, it is not on the same side of the stage as the sofa, which is the next article of furniture to be placed. If the table and the sofa and the door were all on the same side of the stage, it would be much too crowded, especially as the larger part of the subsequent action revolves about them. Lane, then, is busied with the tea things for a moment, as and after the curtain rises. Then the music of a piano is heard off stage to the right. It stops, and a moment later Algernon enters. As he evidently has nothing in particular to do at that moment, he may stand at the center of the stage, facing Lane, who stops his work and respectfully answers his master's questions. When Algernon says, "And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?" what more natural than that he should look in the direction of the table, and perhaps even make a step toward it. Lane then goes to the table, takes up the salver with the sandwiches on it, and hands it to Algernon. Here there are no other directions than hands them on salver. The other business is inferred from the dialogue. Algernon then inspects them, takes two, and sits down on the sofa. This is the first reference to the sofa. The original prompt copy must, of course, have made clear exactly where each article of furniture stood, but for the reasons above enumerated, let us place the sofa as in the diagram, stage left. Notice now that nothing is said of the salver, but from the direction near the top of page 3, goes over and takes sandwich, we may assume that Lane takes the salver back to the table. Undoubtedly he does this as Algernon sits on the sofa. This stage direction should be indicated in the prompt copy, as well as in that of the actor playing Lane, as follows the diagram below. As soon as Lane has done this, or even before, Algernon resumes his conversation, while Lane turns and listens to him. Lane stands somewhere between the table and the sofa, at a respectful distance from Algernon. The next business occurs when Algernon says, "That will do, Lane, thank you," and Lane replies, "Thank you, sir," and goes out. This brings up another question which is not answered, as yet at least, in the text. Does Lane go out right? Possibly. Or is there another entrance left, leading to the butler's room? So far as we are able to determine, there is no good reason why the room to the right, where Algernon was playing, should not lead to the butler's room, or to wherever he is supposed to go. And in this case, there is no reason why Lane cannot, during Algernon's soliloquy, have heard the doorbell ring, answered it, and been ready to re-enter, announcing as he does, "Mr. Ernest Worthing." Jack then enters right. Although again there is no stage direction, it is likely that Algernon rises to greet his friend and shake hands with him. Once more, the stage directions, or rather the want of them, are apt to confuse. On the top of page 3, we read that Jack pulls off his gloves. He wears a hat, of course, and probably a coat. He carries his hat in his hand, but presumably still wears his coat, and certainly his gloves. Lane, before he leaves, would undoubtedly take Jack's hat, help him off with his coat, and take them out with him. Then before the two men shake hands, if they do, Jack pulls off his gloves. Jack's line, "Eating as usual, I see, Algy," is sufficient indication to prove that in one hand Algernon holds a sandwich. Algernon then sits down. The dramatist would surely have mentioned Jack sitting down if that had been his intention. Therefore, Jack may stand. Now comes the direction about Jack's pulling off his gloves. What does he do with them? For the present at least, let us allow him to go to the tea table and lay them on it. A moment later, Algernon goes over and takes sandwich. He stands by the table eating, and this attracts Jack's attention to the somewhat elaborate preparations for tea. Algernon then says, "By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?" But Jack, too engrossed in the preparations, scarcely hears the other, and answers, "Shropshire? Yes, of course," and so on. Then he evidently goes to the tea table. This is the general method of attack to be pursued. It may be that later in the same scene it will be necessary to go back and undo some of this business, because the only available text of this play, and this is almost always true of printed plays, is not in prompt copy form. The making, therefore, of a prompt copy is a slow process. First, the director goes through the play and plans in a general way what the action is to be, but only by rehearsing his cast on a particular stage and under specific conditions is he able to know every detail of the action. By the time the actors are letter perfect, the prompt copy ought likewise to be fairly perfect. It is always dangerous to change business after the actors have memorized their parts. During this preliminary blocking out process, little or no attention need be paid to details. The mere outlining of the action, together with the reading of the lines by the actors, is sufficient. And with that, I think we'll end this evening's reading from How to Produce Amateur Plays, a Practical Manual. I don't know about you, but I love reading manuals. I don't even care what the subject is. It's just fun to learn how things are done, and I hope you enjoyed that as well. If you'd like to read this work for yourself and see the diagrams discussed, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, you can drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.